Hello, and welcome to Running Effective Meetings. This is all about how presidents and vice presidents, in the absence of a president, can run effective Omega Phi Alpha chapter meetings. Let's dive in. The overview of the content that I'm going to cover in this is what's the need and purpose of your meeting? How do you organize for a meeting? How do you run a meeting? And what are the different types of meetings? We'll also cover some additional details of meetings as well. When you're planning a meeting and you're trying to decide what is the purpose of this meeting? Why am I holding this meeting? You should ask yourself a few questions. So, why am I scheduling this meeting? What do I want to accomplish through this meeting? How am I going to prepare for this meeting? What information needs to be exchanged? What decisions do we need to make? And who will be attending the meeting that I need to meet where they are or gain their support? So the answer of some of these questions may be for a chapter president. I'm scheduling this meeting to review information with my executive board. I need to accomplish some executive planning tasks. Maybe there is some budgeting or banking information that needs to be covered with the executive board. Maybe you need bank minutes for your bank account to change who the signers are. That's something that you might want to accomplish during an EB meeting, especially like the first one of the year or the semester. What information will be exchanged. Maybe there are some details that you need to share with all your executive board officers, like upcoming due dates from the national organization, such as membership status changes that someone on your team will be responsible for, and then who's attending the meeting. So in the example that I'm giving you, that would be the executive board. Of course, there could be committee meetings and chapter meetings as well. So sometimes there are more efficient ways to meet your objectives of meeting than to have an in-person meeting. I think now in 2022, we have realized this more than ever after we spent much of the last 2 years doing a lot of things virtually. So I know chapters have returned to mostly in-person chapter meetings, and we strongly encourage that when it's safe and possible, because we do find that having that in-person connection with your chapter members is extremely important. Some of our executive boards meet in person, but some of them are meeting virtually, and we would definitely leave that open to whatever works for you all. It's definitely something to consider. You know, we hear that question, could this have been an email or could this have been a phone call? Like, did we need to meet? So it's definitely something to consider as you go into planning your meetings for this semester. When you're organizing for a meeting, it's really, really important to identify what's the purpose of the meeting. We've talked about this 3 times already, and we're only a few minutes into this presentation. So obviously this is really, really, really important. What is the need for a meeting? Why am I having this meeting? And then after you determine that, you need to determine what is the structure of the meeting. Is this going to be more formal? What is the agenda going to be? How do I want to structure the agenda so that the meeting goes according to that? We also need to consider the location and time. Often we need input from others to determine this. Most of you probably know that Doodle is a great option for determining meeting location or meeting time. And then we need to determine who's participating in the meeting. When you're talking about meeting structure, we have to consider the purpose. Again, we're going to keep talking about that. What's the purpose of this meeting? So do you need a presentation? Do you need a way to have a presentation? Do you have videos that you want to share? Do you want to have small discussion groups? Do you want to have team building activities? Do you want to have a guest speaker? Do you want to have panel sessions where you're opening up to your members or your executive board asking questions from others? So this could look a million different ways. This could be during a chapter meeting. Maybe it's a leadership guest speaker, or even during an executive board meeting. Maybe your chapter health specialist or the chapter health manager is attending your meeting and is sharing additional training information. So that would be considered a guest speaker. Maybe there's a short presentation that you want to show or a video from an organization that you're considering volunteering for or doing a service project for, and you want to share with your chapter to get their opinion, or maybe the service director wants to share with other members of the executive board. And then in terms of discussion groups, maybe there's something that you're trying to determine and you want to break it up into smaller discussion groups so it's not some big, overwhelming conversation that's happening. So you can definitely do that. Maybe during a chapter meeting, you want to do team building activities, and you want to divide people into groups and do different team building. So definitely consider what the structure of your meeting is going to be and what it is that you need for the meeting. In terms of location and time, I think this is probably pretty obvious and we don't need to spend a lot of time here, but you should definitely consider the size of your group. This is really important if your chapter has grown substantially from semester to semester, finding a new location that will fit the group comfortably. We always want to consider accessibility for any members that have needs in terms of accessibility. This could be sound, audio, the accessibility of getting in and out of the location. And we want to consider parking, travel time, distance, etc. It's really important, I think, at the beginning of every semester to consider, does this location and time that we did last semester still work? Sometimes as chapters, we sort of get into this just habit, really. And we just do the same thing because it's what we've always done. And I think it's really, really important for chapters to acknowledge that things can and do change, and you can change what your chapter has always done if that's what works best for people. It's really, really important to schedule the meeting for a realistic length of time. If your chapter meetings always go an hour and a half, schedule them for an hour and a half. Do not schedule them for 1 hour because then you're disappointing people and people often check out after that 1 hour mark. Same thing for your executive board meetings. Sometimes people report that executive board meetings are really quick, so don't schedule them for an hour if you only need 30 minutes. And you can also schedule them based on what the agenda has. If you have a really small agenda and it's only going to take 30 minutes, schedule it for that. If the next time you have a lot more that needs to be discussed, then make the meeting longer and let people know that ahead of time. So the agenda, the purpose of the agenda is to clarify what will be discussed during the meeting so that the people who are attending understand what the purpose and the task of the meeting is. It's really, really helpful if you can distribute the agenda beforehand. OPA Portal has a space where you can upload files. You can upload meeting agendas to the meeting itself. So I would encourage you all to do that. You can use OPA Portal to enter your chapter or executive board meetings as a standing meeting that members are required to attend. And then you can upload the meeting agenda to the files, and you can take meeting minutes right on OPA Portal too. The agenda should also be used as a guide for the direction of the meeting. It should contain the meeting title and purpose, the time, date, location, and the items to be covered, and the person responsible for leading discussion on each item. The agenda of your meeting should follow some sort of structure like you see on the screen here. There should always be a call to order and attendance. We always recite the purpose of Omega Phi Alpha at the beginning of meetings. The review of last week's minutes, especially for a chapter meeting or for an executive board meeting, if you don't meet every week or a committee meeting doesn't meet every week, then perhaps it's just a review of the previous meeting's minutes. And this could be that you post them, you make them available, you ask if people have questions or edits to the meetings. And then officer reports, committee reports, any old business and new business. Old business is business that you've talked about before and you need to revisit, and new business is things that you're introducing for the first time, and then an adjournment to the meeting. As I've mentioned throughout this presentation, there are different types of meetings. There's a chapter meeting, executive board meeting, committee meetings, and chapter standards board meetings. There may be additional meetings that your chapter holds, but these are just the 4 general types of meetings that we would expect people to have. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the types of meetings. We've touched base on some of the things that lead to effective meetings, but let's talk a little bit more in depth. So beginning and ending on time is really important. We talked about that when we talked about setting realistic lengths of times for meetings. So using the agenda is really, really, really important. We've talked about this a couple of times too, but it's also important to review the agenda at the beginning of the meeting and ask if there are any changes or additions. This helps us to really prevent like the meeting going on forever unexpectedly, is that we ask people at the beginning, is there anything you'd like to add to the agenda before we get started? This could be, you could even ask this, does anyone have anything they want to add to new business? Is there anything that we've missed on old business? Another idea is to have an ideas bin. So have members write their ideas down during the meeting and drop them in a bin on their way out, so that it really cuts down on the unnecessary discussion or the discussion that isn't leading anywhere. So one way to describe this is to let members know that they can share ideas or things that they want to discuss at the next meeting by writing them down and turning them in. If you've ever attended a national meeting, such as convention, then you know that we have rules of the day prior to every single business meeting. Usually there's like 15 rules of the day. For a chapter meeting or any other related meetings, I would say your rules of the day could be much smaller, and they could include things like no cell phones, no texting, arrive on time, and do not interrupt others when they are talking. It's good to establish a way to allow discussion when it's not official business. I'll share with you how you can create discussion during official business. But also when discussion is happening, it's really important that we don't let one person dominate all of the discussion. Sometimes when that happens and there's no control on that by the chair of the meeting, it can lead others to feel like they can't really participate. So we want to really allow for attendees to comment and give feedback and really feel like they're participating in a collaborative environment. So getting a large group of people together, like at your chapter meetings, to make decisions is hard, really, really hard. So what can you do to make it easier? Use parliamentary procedure. We know that many of our chapters don't use an official version of parliamentary procedure, and that is fine. However, we do feel it's really important that meetings have structure, and we recommend using Robert's Rules. So we're going to talk about how you can modify Robert's Rules for your meetings. So parliamentary procedure is simply a system of conducting business when working in a group. It's a way to stay focused on a single issue until the members present resolve it. So Robert's Rules is a particular set of parliamentary procedure and guidelines that are commonly used in organizational meetings. They're probably the most well-known rules of parliamentary procedure. Okay, so there are a few roles of Robert's Rules. One is the chair of the meeting. This is usually the chapter president, or in the absence of the president, the vice president who presides over the meeting. Or in the case of a chapter standards board meeting, this would be the vice president. Then there are motion makers, motion seconders, discussers, the parliamentarian, usually the vice president, and voters, all members of the chapter and committee. Of course, the secretary is the person logging all this information and taking minutes. Decisions are motions. Anytime you have a decision that needs to be made, a motion is necessary. So this is especially helpful during new business, is where you would put all the new decisions that need to be made. There may be some decisions that need to be revisited in old business. So here is a possible decision to be made. Should we make going to the animal shelter next Saturday our 60% service to the community at large project? So if that's a decision that needs to be made, you've probably had a little bit of a presentation about it. Maybe the service director has said, I recommend that we go to the animal shelter next Saturday for our 60% project. And so somebody in the audience would say, I move that we make our service to the community at large project going to the animal shelter next Saturday. Okay, so just to reiterate, there's a decision to be made about service, and then somebody that's attending the meeting makes the motion. So what happens after a motion? At least 2 people need to agree that a topic is worth the members discussing it. It doesn't mean you agree with it. It just means that it's worth discussing. So after a motion is made, the chair, the president, should entertain a second. And this person would just say, I second or second. So whomever's making the second does not mean, again, that they agree with the motion, just that they feel like there should be discussion. So even if the person making the second thinks it's a terrible idea and we definitely should not go to the animal shelter, they can still make a second in order to open discussion. So once a motion has been made and seconded, the chair will say it has been moved and seconded that we make our service to the community at large project going to the animal shelter next Saturday. Is there any discussion? So the chair of the meeting will recognize members to speak. Typically, the parliamentarian will log the order of who raised their hand. There should be a time limit on discussion. Typically, it's like 5 minutes. You can say 3 to 5 minutes. I would say longer than 5 minutes is probably going to go too far into your meeting. Discussion ends when the time is up and no motion has been made to extend. So you can make a motion and that motion needs a second to extend discussion by a certain number of minutes. Or if the discussion dies out or there's no discussion to begin with, then discussion ends. I will say that the chair of the meeting should leave time and space, silence, for discussion to start. So if when you say, is there any discussion, you should pause and wait for discussion to start. I think it's probably pretty rare that every single person in your chapter is in agreement on everything. But if there is no discussion, you just say, seeing none, let's move into a vote. If discussion dies out, you could say, seeing no more discussion, let's now move into a vote. What does voting look like? So different motions will take a different number of votes in order to pass. This is described in your chapter's Constitution and Bylaws. So you, as the president, should be super familiar with what the voting numbers are as required by your chapter's Constitution and Bylaws. So you should look that up if you... Usually it's 3/4 or 2/3. Sometimes it's just a simple majority, like for service projects. If it's not noted in your Constitution and Bylaws, then it's a simple majority. So there are 4 general methods of voting that we use in the sorority. Voice vote is when you say all in favor, say aye, all opposed, say nay. And typically, the ayes are, you'll know what's louder. If you don't know, if it's like, oh, that seems really close, then you could say, all the ayes, raise your rose. And you could quickly count the roses. And then you could say, all the nays, raise your rose. And you could quickly count them to get an idea. Additionally, you could do a secret ballot where they write it down on a piece of paper and pass it in. Or you can do a roll call vote. Hopefully, in making small decisions, you can always do a voice vote or a raise your rose vote. Your Constitution and Bylaws will say how election vote should happen, whether that's roll call or secret ballot. Once voting is completed, the chair will read the outcome and say either motion passes or motion fails. So on a voice vote, if the ayes are much louder than the nays, then you could just say the ayes have it, motion passes. For the roses, when you count them, you could say the ayes have X number of votes and the nays, whatever, and then either motion passes or motion fails. When you're ending a meeting, it's really, really important to summarize any important points that happened in the meeting, especially votes. So this would be a really good time to confirm the decisions made. So you may say, okay, we agreed that our next service project is at the animal shelter next Saturday. This is a 60% project. You're expected to attend. Some chapters say if you voted in favor, then you have to attend. So that's something to consider. And we definitely want to review any deadlines that were discussed during the meeting at the end. Let's just have a quick recap of that. And then if there's any action required by any of the participants, we just want to note that. So if you're looking for feedback from your members, we want to use this opportunity at the end of the meeting to review, hey, be sure to submit XYZ by this date. And then always remind participants of the next meeting. If you have committee meetings or executive board meetings coming up in between, you can definitely use this opportunity to remind people of that as well. It's also a great time to review national deadlines like dues, etc. You do need a motion to adjourn the meeting. And then you should send out minutes quickly. As I mentioned a few slides back, you can post minutes on OPA portal. You can actually take minutes during the meeting directly on OPA portal, and then they're posted automatically. I know some people use like a Word document template or whatever. If you could just upload those at the end, that would make it really easy for your members to get the minutes and not require you to send out any additional communication. I know this was a quick review, but I know we covered a lot of information in this short presentation, trying to keep it as short as possible as you're watching this as a replay and we're not able to attend live. But as always, we are here to help you and we are available for any questions that you may have. So please first reach out to your chapter's chapter health specialist, or if you don't have a chapter health specialist, then Taylor is the person that you should reach out to. So you can reach out to your chapter health specialist. It's chs dot whatever their name is at omegaphialpha.org, or to reach Taylor, you can reach out to chapter health at omegaphialpha.org. I'm always here for any questions, managing director at omegaphialpha.org, but reach out to your chapter health team first. They are here to help and are eager to hear from all of you. Thank you so much for watching the replay of this Running Effective Meetings presentation from the Officer Leadership Academy 2022. And I look forward to hearing about your successful, wonderfully run meetings in the future.